Great. So I typically kick episodes off by having the guest tell us who they are and what it is they do.
So I even took some notes because
Oh,
it's complicated. Sometimes I just wanna say that I'm a human because soon as you add a veterinarian to the description, you become a whole list and limitations of a wide variety of
mm,
things, and I wish I could lead with something else, but that's why I'm here. I'm a equine veterinarian. I have 34 years of experience. I started on the racetrack and I was there for a little around 10 years all over the country. I had 11 state licenses and I was actually married to a trainer for a while. So I got to travel with the same group of horses year round
mhm.
throughout the country, be on the track for 10 years working with sort of a very homogenous group of horses, right? They're all thoroughbreds, they're all between 2 and 5 years old. They're wildly different, right? They all have the same number of bones and they all have
Mm.
same muscles, but could they be any more different? And could they handle their lives any more different? And could they respond to things any more different? And when you work from California to the East Coast and back, I started at Rockingham Park at the very bottom of the barrel, ended up at Keeneland, right? And I got to really see all facets of the industry from all different angles. And it made you realize that healing had a lot more to do than just what you actually the 5 things
Treat.
that your vet
Yeah.
told you. There was so much more going on, and I started to become obsessed, I guess, with the miracle cures, the horses that went above and beyond
Mm.
all of the things that came into their lives. No matter what, the same kind of problems, they would still just power through. And I was just really looking for patterns, and eventually I left the track and I started working on sport horses, and it became a lot more important to solve the problems because these horses didn't actually go away, they lived with you
Mhm.
for years, and so I continued on that vein, and I always had in my mind this dream that, like Richard Bach says, "If you're given a dream, you have the power to make it come true,"
Mm.
and it just didn't make sense to me that these horses would just continually suffer with these soundness problems, that we could not find a way to get anybody to a consistent situation where everybody was just okay. It was anything in the performance level was just a constant battle to keep these horses floating,
Mhm.
right? Like for me, I considered it a huge success if the show barns that I managed, if all the horses could make every show. That was that these kids, these people, these plans they would make that they wouldn't have to, that the horses would be able to be whatever. And so I would always kind of look at the year and I would work a lot to prepare because I got in the habit of that on the track where you have these horses year round, you keep them at the top level. How do you
Mhm.
do that? And it's the same thing with the show. So anyway, I evolved in trying to do that. I started searching
Mhm.
very hard and I went and started doing training in many other modalities. I've got a couple acupuncture certifications, chiropractic certifications, advanced chiropractic certifications, homeopathy
Mhm.
certifications, lameness certifications, conventional medicine certifications, and so on. A lot of advanced training after vet school. Anyone that told me they knew how to do this, I went and shadowed, watched,
Mhm.
followed, you name it, because I wanted to because I believe in it. I don't believe that it should be so hard. Eventually, that has led me into training and looking at that aspect of it and where that kind of intersects with the health of the horse, right? I started to see correlations between husbandry, quality of training, the things that I looked around, and just global health of my
Mhm.
clients, and started looking at that space between that. And then when I started working on Zoom, I started being able to get this bird's eye view of the relationship between the human and the horse. And I started realizing that there's a powerful connection between the nervous system of the human and the horse when they're together, and if that is dysfunctional, anything you layer on top of
Mhm.
that isn't really gonna work. So that sort of comes down to I took a class that was called Elements of Connection. And so it was 5 different ways of connecting with horses. It was like through your body language, through animal communication, through meditation, through how you rode them, through whatever, all different ways. And that really opened my eyes to not just that there were different ways of connecting with horses, but that there were enough different ways that you could expect that. So once I started working, doing my sort of version of chiropractic on horses that were able to whatever receive, be connected, be calm, be ventral vagal and an engaging energy from a pole, all of a sudden my interventions completely changed.
Mm.
So it was like pounding against a closed door or walking through an open one, completely
Mhm.
different. So and anything that I had to offer, all of a sudden, it was easy. Like, it wasn't hard. If
Mhm.
he upregulates when I get into his space, then I might as well just go home for the
Yeah.
day, okay? But I never realized that, and so that goes the same for if your horse has respiratory disease and I'm going to come in and give it an examination, if that walking in and examining it is going to put it into a dysfunctional or vigilant or
Mhm.
unsafe or sympathetic part of its nervous system, then it's not going to heal. It's gonna almost offset what I have to offer it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to if the horse is hyper vigilant, like, if you look at a foal that's born in a hospital, it's already got its head above 90
Mm.
degrees all day long, so it's already hyper vigilant at 0
At a
age.
core. Yeah.
So, that horse is done because how does it get back to the other side? So, basically, as a veterinarian trying to do like chiropractic work and
Mhm.
having an idea of what I want to accomplish, solving that problem is what I do. Right. So
Mhm.
basically, what it turns out is that there's a big intersection between the muscle patterns of the horse and the nervous system of the horse. And so many of our horses don't just mentally feel safe. Their bodies are what I
Mhm.
call an unsafe meat suit.
Yeah. When I work with people with problem horses, they I go, "Oh, your horse is in its mind right now. He's not in his body." And they were like, "If he was in his mind, he'd know not to do this thing." And I go, "But they're bodily animals. Like they live in their body. They live through feeling." And so your horse, from the time he leaves his stall to the time he snaps back in and starts spooking and bucking and whatever, he has no idea how he got to point B, which is why he's freaking out. It's everything at the base level. Like people call me and they're surprised that I don't even leave the stall the first session because I'm like, he's not ready. And you see so many by the time they get good enough to start getting ridden again, I realize all the biomechanical and postural issues that these horses have. And yeah, so that's actually how I found your work is just trying to overall enhance horses' posture. And so many people don't even think of posture as something that could make their horse spooky or lame or whatever. They think my horse is tough as lame. And it's, oh, no.
Yeah, it's that and that's where there's this big intersection, right, between the training, which is the mental part of it, right? But it's also if the body can't manage a good posture, like to neutral posture, they don't want to be in it because of that either.
Exactly.
So you have these, like for me, there's these two very specific things going on that actually, if you solve these 2 little problems, everything else goes very
Mhm.
easily, and so that's been the problem that I work on, like, I wanna make it 5 times I want 'em to take you 1 hour to solve this problem and be able to move on with a horse that's all ready to go,
Yeah.
kinda thing. That's because I think that we solve the body problem, then the mind problem comes along.
Mm,
And a lot of people are actually pretty good at solving the mind problem. They're pretty good at
mm,
being a person that downregulates the horse,
mhm.
right? I'm not. So I've had to really work through that part of it because I'm like the polar opposite of that
Yeah.
human, like with on steroids times a million, right? Like she's get your grabby paws out of them, right? And so we're really, as veterinarians, we have a lot of yawn energy. We want to
Mm,
do. There's a lot of equestrians like that, but then
mhm,
there's a lot of equestrians that are not like that. And
mhm.
then there's a lot of kind of people that kind of can go fluidly between those ways of being, where
Yep.
when they're around a horse, it's like they just melt and they're super parasympathetic and the horse is happy. And then there's the other ones that upregulate. So for me, I always upregulated the horses in my humanness, which is why I have this really great teacher at home who schools on me daily, seeing the people that don't do that and what kind of horse you have after that.
Mm,
So my work has really been about how do you take the upregulated human
mm,
and still help that horse and help that relationship. Like no matter how, because I have to work for like someone like myself is really dense, really slow, really doesn't get it. Your worst nightmare as a trainer because I look the part, but I can't execute
mm.
anything and so on. And so that's where I started is how do we get these horses into the part of their nervous system where they can accept healing if you're not a quote unquote natural horseman.
Yeah, going back to when you first started talking and you were like, "I'm about to label myself as a veterinarian." To add more labels, you are a holistic vet. So when you're meeting a horse and human for the first time, like, what do your diagnostics and even maybe into treatment path look like versus a normal vet out of vet school? How is that?
So it's really evolved over the years and I've gotten really binary because
Mhm,
it for me, if the owner isn't willing to work on this part of it, right? Like I stopped by, I saw a horse and it had a foot injury, but it also couldn't stand quietly next to its owner. It was very vigilant. And I used to I might do an exam on that horse. I might, like, scan it for acupuncture points where it was sore, like it had a right front injury. I would examine the hind end. I would examine the muscles. I would probably adjust it, right? So work
mhm,
on the spine, do, like, my chiropractic exam, all with the lens that, okay, if I get this body good and healthy, then it can handle the injury, right? So most horses are in what we call like an adaptive compensatory posture. So once they have an injury, they're already laying on that injury.
mhm,
It's usually a leg they're already using too much as then injured. So there's always a reason behind the reason. There's always something behind what you
mhm,
do. And so long ago, I remember I had a horse that was like one butte lame, and I started looking. I'm like, I can't fix this problem. It was some like scar or flexor tendon
mhm,
in the foot. But I'm like, maybe if I could make the hocks a little better, maybe if I could make the other shoulder a little
mm,
better, then maybe the horse would look sound. And it did, right? So I started looking at the body that was handling the injury, right? I started looking at the things that weren't talking, like a group project, right? So you always have one person working really hard and one person doing nothing, right? And those are like the four legs of the horse, right? You
mm,
got one horse that's like doing the most. It's usually one of the hind legs that immediately outsources to the two front legs, trying their hardest. And then there's a hind limb that's just like along for the ride rather than trying to support the person that's working hard, get the rest of the animal to participate a little more. That makes a huge difference because all the horses are meant to heal in motion. They're meant to compensate. They're meant to outsource. They're meant
mhm,
to move things around. But most of our horses get into a state that I call they don't have a leg to stand on.
mm,
So most horses have a dysfunctional thoracic sling where they're
mm,
bracing and they're not pushing back at the ground. They're holding tight against each other. And then neither of the hind legs are really stable. If the cannon bones aren't vertical, then they're not effectively carrying the load.
mm. Interesting.
Like they're
S
just not. They're squeezing to stay vertical.
Upright.
So it's like a squeeze up instead of a resting into
Mm.
alignment.
So if I'm looking at a horse and maybe I've always assumed, or maybe I bought this horse and was told conformationally they're camped under. How would I know looking at that horse that it's the thoracic sling or maybe some other compensation sort of thing and not said conformation fall?
You have to first believe that we all have the ability to like interface vertically with gravity and
Mhm.
get to a resting state.
Mm.
So, like, I look at a horse as a table, right? You would have no problem not buying a camped under table. You
Yeah.
would be like, this table is going to fall over if I put anything on it. And you would walk away and you'd go to the next flea market stand and be like, I need one that folds all the way out so I can put something on top of it. It's bewildering to me why we have passed that point with our horses. Like,
Mm.
and it's only because, in my opinion, all almost all sport horses are squeezing to stay upright. They're using what I call the mobilizing muscles. They're muscles for movement, right?
Mm.
We look at a horse that has muscles that we can see, and we like that, right? Like, we talk about how, like, a young horse shouldn't be doing lateral work. I was listening to a podcast, right?
Mm.
Think about the 3-year-old martial artists
Ah.
in Japan that are flinging themselves around in all kinds of crazy shapes and sizes with no closed growth
Mhm.
plates or anything, right? And it's because they're using different muscle groups. They're using the deep postural, cybernetic, gymnastic muscle groups,
Mm.
right? And so those muscle groups only train in joint extension. Okay. They only train in joint extension. They will not train in flexion.
Okay.
So if you can't get your joint into full extension, you can't train those muscles. You don't get to use them. You don't get them. And we skip that pretty much in like 100% of our training. And the most athletic horses in the world, they're the naturals, they have that anyway. That's like a natural, like, if you're a natural athlete, you have
Mhm.
natural suspension, you have space between your joints, you have the muscles between
Mm.
them that allow for space, right? So it's just
Yep.
like a layer cake. When we accept the fact that the hock joint just smushes together and that layer cake loses all the ice cream, right? We just
Yeah.
accept it. But along with the loss of that ice cream, we also lose the entire suspension of the hind end because there's
Yep.
no bounce. It's gone.
Mm.
There's no space, there's no bounce, so as soon as you come up, you hit a brick wall, all the ice cream's gone between the little buildings, and there's no bounce there, and so now the biomechanics are never there's no movement in that
Mm.
joint. So, that leg is supposed to bounce the way it's designed. It's not designed to be all mushed together. That's because we put the table on it when the legs were in the wrong place. We put dinner on the table when
Mhm.
the legs were camped under, so it mushed the ice cream out because it couldn't get to
Mm.
alignment. The hind end is like a hydraulic bridge in my mind, and everything should go up and down
Okay.
while the joints maintain space between them, right? So, like, our expectations of normal are what we see as a natural.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like comparing every horse to Michael Jordan and saying he might be this, but despite that, he's still just that good of an athlete where someone else who does those things, who doesn't have that same natural ability, isn't gonna be able to get away with it.
That's different. So the difference between the 2 of them is that Michael Jordan, no matter what, has maintained space between his joints, so he can bounce. He's
Okay.
trained his joints at extension. So think about, like, cheerleaders, right? They go from extension to
Mhm.
flexion, right? Like, the
Yep.
best cheerleaders, they get stiff as a board, and the same as the best jumpers, right? Stiff as a board to get the
Mhm.
height, then they curl, then stiff as a board, right?
Mm.
And so it's the ability to get to that full extension. If you think about the way that jumpers land, either in a heap, like a collapse, or like in a bounce,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So but that bounce is what our expectations is that bounce, only some people get that.
So, I guess then, like, if my horse does have bad posture, are they doomed, or is there anything that I can
No,
do?
Lots you can do. So
Okay.
the first thing you have to do is you have to get their nervous system in what's called like whatever receiving energy, or you
Mhm.
have to have it. They cannot upregulate when they're with you, right?
Mm.
So the first exercise that I like to do with horses is I call like the Haida clock, right? So you have the horse and it's on the end of a lead rope. And I can't remember who was talking about it, but like when you're in front of the horse's shoulder, right, your energy is coming at their
Mm.
space and it's pushing into them, right? So there's a certain point when we get near our horses where they might pick their head up or they might go into a vigilant or like a brace posture, right?
Mhm.
And that is the edge of where you stop. Once
Mm.
you like, so you stop there, right?
Yeah.
And see what that is, okay? Because there the horse is telling you already that any closer, he's going into the sympathetic part of his nervous
Mm.
system. So he's not ready. So when you say you start in the stall, I start 10 feet away from the horse on the
Mm.
end of the lead shed.
Yeah.
Now, if that horse can't stand still when I like walk up to it, I'm like, bye, call this person,
Yeah.
and I leave because I don't need to work that hard anymore.
Yeah.
So if that horse throws its head in the air when I walk towards it, then by the time it doesn't throw its head in the air when I walk towards it, so much healing is going to be accomplished that I can maybe go in and do 3 things and it'll be better.
What about horses who are in trade, competition horses who are it's a bit more regimented of they need these many conditioning sets and whatnot. And this is where I find the intersection of sport and kind of empathy and whatnot interesting.
I believe that we can solve this problem, but people have got to take a little bit of a step back. If they understand the power of training the postural and the
Mhm.
gymnastic muscles. So, like, you look at Tom Brady, right? Who was a football quarterback, and he designed his own training. It's called like pliability training, and
Okay.
ended up being a quarterback till his mid 40s. He's like the greatest quarterback of all time, and had to take on a tremendous load. Not only was he a big, heavy guy,
Mhm.
but he also got hit all the time, right? And we're not developing our horses to absorb force. We're not developing them to be able to extend their joints.
Mm.
Nobody out there, some of the great trainers are doing that sort of by default. That's
Mhm.
why they're
Yeah.
great trainers. If you go to a Buck Brannahan clinic, the first weekend, the horses are all over the place. By the last weekend, they're all standing square. Their cannon
Mhm.
bones are all vertical. The posture is all perfect, right?
Mm.
I don't know what he's doing, but through that, he's getting those horses to work with gravity. He's getting the people to work with gravity.
Mm.
He's getting them into a different part of their nervous system. He's getting them out of hypervigilance into parasympathetic, into engagement.
Mm.
And that is the baseline of where we begin.
Okay.
And if we begin there, if we begin all our training there, if we begin everything we do from that beginning lens, it will take a little longer, but like we will develop thousands of natural athletes.
Yeah, I do a lot of buying off the track thoroughbreds, and they come all screwed. I have a method or a system of taking these inverted naturally horses, and before I even get on them, they're trotting around with their nose on the ground and doing all of that stuff. It's not that my system is the best system or whatever, but you realize after getting bucked off a few times that there's got to be a better way for all of you to accomplish this thing. And there's a big shift happening, I think, in the equestrian world where people are realizing it is okay for things to take a little bit longer. I have this one horse who she's been rehabbing for like over a year because what started as a hoof imbalance turned into me realizing she has a really bad thoracic sling and that's causing these hind end issues. And once I fixed the postural stuff, actually, I was just talking about this in another podcast, but I noticed that her girthiness went away. I didn't treat her for ulcers once, and her sensitivity to brushing went away. She just became overall a much more willing participant. And this was already when you're talking about your natural athletes, like, despite all of that, she was still a freak of nature. But it took a really long time to get there. And I'm based at a barn with other trainers. And I'm telling you, they were like, "What are you doing, girl?" Like, the pull work and the this exercise and the I do something similar with I stand on the end of a lead rope, and because she always wants to be in my space, so no, be in your own space, and
That's like the beginning,
yeah.
right? And I see that a lot is that what I really found in Zoom, so like what we're really looking for when we're riding a horse is self-carriage, right? We
Mhm,
want the horse to be carrying itself and be able to carry us,
mhm,
right? So it has to be able to be stable underneath us and be soft. We're looking for this softness and this stability that comes with the self-carriage. And so you take a horse that doesn't even want to be in its body on the ground next to you, and you try to get on it and do something. And so it's really cool to see that, like that one exercise, just getting them into their bodies on the ground next to you can make you see it, you can almost see a change in their posture just doing that.
yeah,
Cause I don't think a lot of them, they're really not paying attention to where
mhm,
their bodies are. They're not really aware. I call it outsourcing sometimes when the horses will only put their heads on the ground, like they won't bring it up and send the center of mass to their hind
yeah,
end. And so don't put the head below the shoulder because then they just becomes like a fifth leg.
mm,
And then they're basically sending themselves into the
yeah,
ground in front of them. So then I have to get the people, I ask them to stand behind the horse so they start to have the awareness back there and you
yeah,
start to bring them in. And what's amazing is how much of the healing the horse will take on of its own accord once it gets back into its body.
mhm,
And so, where I've been able to shortcut this whole thing is that the horse's body won't really receive a lot of load if it can't get into extension and be able to press back at the ground. Hawks, they don't really get into full extension. You pick their legs up and they want to do this. They don't really
yeah,
want to give you their whole leg, right? And it can be hard to really get them to give you their whole leg. But if you can't exercise that extension, you can't exercise the muscle groups that go with, and the beautiful thing is that when you extend a joint, it tells the brain that they're safe. You can down-regulate a horse by being a down-regulated person. You
mhm,
can down-regulate them by not a lot of your behaviors, a lot of the way you stand, a lot of places where you
mhm,
stand, but you can also down-regulate them by letting their body tell them that they're safe.
mhm,
And that's where chiropractors for years have been successful or sometimes even magical in their work because they can actually get joints that have been highly invested in being crammed together into a range of motion to where they can get into extension,
mhm,
right? So if you have like the first cervical vertebrae jammed up there, no matter how many times the horse puts their head down, if between the head and the first cervical vertebrae, you've got this tension, this
mhm,
suboccipital muscle jamming in there. A lot of thoroughbreds have got a little bit of a head
mhm,
tilt. No matter what you do, they bring their neck out and make a curve, and you can get them soft. But if you've got that one place jammed, it's sending a constant message all the time where you never really can get that threshold as low as you
yeah,
need it. So you always have a horse. I call it like the neural substrate, like the strength of the neural substrate. And what we're trying to do is get it so our horses are always really calm and happy and joyful, want to play when
mhm,
they're around us, basically. And just like people, we all have a threshold before we upregulate. And my work is addressing that threshold,
mhm,
right? So there's lots of different ways that you can do it, and one of the ways that you can do it is joint extension, and that's where I'm obsessed with the Surefoot pads.
mm,
Because if you think about it, when you take that hard half physio pad and you put a horse's foot on it
mhm,
and they press into it, what are they doing?
extending,
And when else in the
mm,
horse's entire world would they do that?
yeah,
Like never, right? What if extending that? So, what you have to understand is that there's a difference between extension and there's a difference between not flexion, right?
What is extension of the in motion when they're like at the end of their stride? And is that for both like the hind legs is extension when they're going forwards or backwards or both?
So extension from the hind leg is their impulsion. Most horses don't have any.
True that.
So when do you train the hind end extension in
Mm.
our work? Right? Hill
Mhm.
work, hind end extension? No, it's building up your flexors, right? So if you think about the hind end, and this is like where I got popular and got good at when I got in demand in terms of when I worked on horses, is because of my hind end work. Most horses don't have, and people, this goes for all people as well, pretty much. Our hips are actually not stable in the joint, just the joint itself with no muscle. So if you
Mm.
think about it, if you take away all the movement muscle, at the very basic, you strip all that stuff off, you have the joint and you have the ligaments and the stuff around the joint, those ligaments that you see that are around it. Who trains those? What if we train those? Ballerinas train those.
Yeah.
Pilates trains those. Yoga tries to, but nobody gets it done in yoga because everybody cheats and uses their mobilizer muscles because they have to stay too stable to do the yoga poses when they're not
Mm.
ready. But so it's really stability in extension is what you have to think about.
Mm. Yeah.
So the greatest athletes have stability in joint extension because once that joint is extended, it's bouncy.
Okay. Yeah. Cause I know talking about the Surefoot pads, I talk to a lot of people that use them and they go, I don't know why, but every time I use them before a ride or whatever, I have the best ride. My horse is standing there yawning and they're so happy.
So this is like my work. This isn't like Surefoot works. This is like
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
experience
Yeah.
that I just find that the Surefoot half physio pad has this magical density that seems to match the
Mhm.
tendon. So it almost matches like the joint, like the tendons that are around the joint in
Mhm.
density. So the horse feels very safe exploring that space. It's not going to collapse on it and it pushes back enough so it's safe. So basically, what we have to understand is once we activate our mobilizer muscles, we activate our sympathetic nervous system. So almost all of our rehab is mobilizing, activating mobilizing muscles. So if we go over a pole, we're going from flexion to flexion. We're not doing any extension, right? If we
Mhm.
do a cavaletti, so most of the time what we do in rehab is we just train the mobilizer muscles to stabilize the joint from the outside instead of going deep into that joint and doing that little Pilates work where we stand on that little thing and just
Mhm.
rotate our foot just a tiny bit to the left and a tiny bit to the right.
Interesting.
So that's where the Surefoot pad gives you that awareness of
Mhm.
what you have and don't have. And so I only do one foot at a time because I'm just trying to get that stretch. I'm not trying to get the horse
Soften them up and
whatever.
yeah. Yeah.
All I want is stretch at the joint because the other thing is that when you stretch the joint and you stand on the pad, that also fires up the cerebellum, which fires up the frontal cortex, which downregulates the sympathetic nervous system. So the cool thing about the nervous system in horses is that you can't go head and head with the sympathetic nervous system, right?
Mhm.
Like you cannot scream at it and make it
Yeah.
calm,
Yeah.
right? You have to either leave and come back later. If I get into a situation as a vet where I'm working on a horse and it gets out of control, I have to leave. It's over.
Yeah.
No amount of sedation, we're done,
Mhm.
right? So same thing with a hysterical child, right? Like you can't just scream at them, but
Yeah.
you can be like, "Oh, do you want a lollipop?" And they're like, "Oh, sure, I'll get parasympathetic for that." And so off they go with their lollipop. And so it's the same thing with horses where you have to distract them out of their thing. And
Yeah.
the pads basically train them out of it. They fool them
Mhm.
into that stage of social engagement by firing up the frontal cortex, which will downregulate the sympathetic nervous system from the back door.
Say.
So, like seeking and interest, anything that interests you, right? In
Mhm.
play, that will that actually tells the sympathetic nervous system it takes a chokehold off of it and allows like the parasympathetic to shine. So the way that the two nervous systems are related to each other is one factor in that you can't downregulate by upregulating. You have to downregulate by saying, come over here, let's
Mm.
do this. You have to change up the game.
Mhm.
You can't just go after it. That's why
Yeah.
like screaming, beating horses, shanking, whatever, like that never
Doesn't
leads
work.
to
Yeah.
progress. We all know any good horse person has figured that part out.
Yeah.
And the great horse people are just the calmest
Mhm.
people. They walk in and the horses are like, "Hey, can I come stand next to you?
Mhm.
It feels good." And that's our ability to keep ourselves grounded and down regulated. When we have a horse that has an injury, if we can get it to a calm state and we can get it to start stabilizing its joints, any of its joints, then it starts to become stronger in all kinds of ways. And as it becomes stronger in all kinds of ways that we don't know, that allows that injury to heal. So again, you don't go ahead with the injury either, right? The injury is a yawn representation of everything that's going on behind the scenes, which is almost 100% of the time the nervous system.
Yeah.
So where we could do better with rehab is we start with the nervous system. Ultimately, the horses are going to force us into this. The people that are willing to start over and start at the beginning and train the foundation, train the structure, get the structure right with gravity, give the horse self-carriage. Horse won't have to go behind the vertical if it can stand on its legs and push back at the ground.
This has been very informative.
The ultimate summary is that the nervous system rules the joints
Mm.
and the joints rule the nervous system. But if we work on both,
You fix
then we have a long-term healing
Yeah.
situation that continues to heal itself because the horse will heal its own joints once it's in its body and it's aware of it and we give it the tools. So there is an easier way. Like I
Mhm.
really believe that. And I really believe that if we hack into their bodies in the same way that everybody's doing the really good job with the husbandry and the really good job with the
Mhm.
nervous system and the real awareness of that part of it, start being aware, having higher expectations of what their bodies, get your hands on their joints, rub them, feel them, make some space, get them moving, create range of motion, and do that and your other stuff. And I think you'll find
Much
you'll
happier, healthier horses.
they'll maintain their nervous system easier
Mhm.
because they're going to be happier staying in their bodies.
Yeah, for sure. How do people follow along with what you do and all of that good stuff?
So I have a website called Heart Equine, and I do virtual consulting as well as gait like analysis. Like people will send in
Mm.
a Surefoot pad walking exercise, and I can evaluate
Mm.
your horse. And I do a it's only $75, and I do like a voiceover. This is happening in this leg. This is what's wrong with this leg. This is what's wrong
Okay.
with that leg. It's fun, I think. There's a lot of resources on my website just about using the pads and how I use them and why
Mhm.
in the nervous system and just more information that I'm also for subscribers, I'm going to give a webinar next month, a free webinar about this exact same thing. It's like an
Oh,
intro to
awesome.
chiropractic. And so it's going to be like the joints and the relation, how the joints relate to the nervous system. So how, you can put your hands on the joints and support what you're trying to do with your horse and do a much better job. And
Mm.
you'll understand why if your horse's posture isn't right and it's still spooking at the end of the
Mhm.
driveway, go back to the posture
Yeah.
and then go back to your own posture and then go back to your own.
Yep.
And then I'm trying to get off social media, but in the meantime, I'm still there. So there's Hard Equine on social media. And I'm working on some other offerings as well. I just got trained to teach a human Qigong
Mm.
program, which is all about getting your joints and extensions. I think that if people start to understand in their own bodies what their horses are able to do in theirs.
Mhm.
Really, I think we can make some really positive changes. I feel really positive about I see all of my clients just making really positive changes and doing it really
Mhm.
easily. So there's hope out there.
Yeah.
We have a big wave going. So thank you for what you do and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.